The Portarlington-based Data Protection Commissioner is investigating possible breaches of patient confidentiality at Tallaght Hospital. The hospital, which used a private firm in the Philippines to transcribe medical records and GP letters, has confirmed data was accessed on an unauthorised basis. So if you're concerned, you can find out more from a free phone number, 1-800-283-059. That number is in place between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m, or at least they say you can access it. Cora, good morning.
Morning, Will.
You've been having trouble with this, have you?
Yeah, I've been a patient in Tallaght with a neurologist since March, and I rang this morning just to find out if my files had been compromised, and basically all I was told on the phone was they couldn't tell me anything because it was being investigated by the gardaí, by Tallaght Hospital, by the HSC, by the Data Protection Commissioner and by the Philippine authorities, and that I wouldn't know anything or whether my files had been compromised until they would ring me if they had, once the investigation has finished. So they don't actually tell you anything at all, and they don't ease any concerns or fears or anything.
And this was the 1-800 free phone number, was it?
Yeah.
Seems a bit useless then, really, to you.
That's what I actually said to the girl on the phone. She was a nice girl, but I just said to her, there's really no point in having this helpline then. And she just said nothing to me. She just kind of just said I'd have to wait and see if I got a phone call at the end of the investigation. But
she did, I assume, take your details and find out what your case history was and then say that you would get the call back?
Nope. Nothing. I actually offered to give her my hospital number. She wouldn't even take that. She didn't take my name or nothing, what consultant I was seeing in Dublin, nothing.
Oh, right. OK. I assumed from what you were saying that you at least would log your concern and they would follow it up.
No, they don't do anything. All you're told is that it's being investigated, and you'll be rang after the investigation if your files were one of the ones that was accessed unauthorised.
Well, you would assume that would happen anyway, so why have the free phone number?
I think it's just a waste of time, really, to have that number there when there's no information being given at all, apart from, the investigation. But we knew that anyway from the news, like on the radios and on the TV. So there's no additional information being given to you. You're just being told that you'll just have to wait, basically.
How do you feel about knowing that your information may have been accessed?
I'm a little bit peeved, to be honest, because I'm a private person, and I'm open to all my friends about my condition. It's a brain condition, and I'm very open with all my friends because it can change my mood at times. But the kind of thing where it's hard for me to trust anyone I don't know, and then the fact that people that I don't know at all could be looking at my stuff and reading through everything and reading through my profiles and my medical histories and everything. It's like an invasion of my privacy.
Yeah, it's a violation.
Yeah, it just feels violated that my personal information, there's a lot of information that I was asked in March on my first visit there. And a lot of it is personal, and to think that anyone could be looking at that or have looked at it, it's off-putting.
I can't imagine, actually. It's not something that anybody would want. It's certainly something that the Data Protection Commissioner will take very seriously, and I'm sure all the hospital authorities will examine as best they can how it managed to happen. It seems odd that a private firm in the Philippines would be transcribing medical reports for a hospital in Ireland.
I found that odd too. There's plenty of even people that are secretaries or doing secretarial work that are maybe even out of work that could have been brought in to do this, rather than going to a private firm in a different country and have files shipped thousands of miles, whatever, when it could have been done here. If they really wanted to bother to get the people to do it, they could have been.
Yeah, it's not unusual for firms within the EU to trade together, but for the Philippines it seems like a far-flung destination. Yeah. Maybe they have very stringent data protection laws in that jurisdiction. Who knows? But it's obviously fallen down here, and you feel exposed, and rightly so because of that, and got very little help. Was she even sympathetic, Cora?
I wouldn't say sympathetic, but she was nice. You couldn't really kind of give out to her if you were annoyed by it. She was a nice girl, but it was kind of just, there was no sorry or anything. It was just basically told that I wouldn't know until I got a phone call, and I might not even get a phone call if mine haven't been compromised, and that was it, really.
Did she even give you any extra information that hadn't been in the public domain? Did she explain it in clear terms?
No, just all I told you there, Will, basically about I wouldn't know till the investigation's finished and who's investigating it and everything, and that's it.
Okay. Cora, I hope and I pray that your information hasn't been compromised, but unfortunately we assume that many people have been. Yeah. We'll know more once the investigation is complete. Thanks for calling us.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks indeed. If you do want to try that free phone number, the HSE has set it up. Cora didn't find it very useful. Maybe you would. 1800 283059. 1800 283059. Again, it applies to patients at Tallaght Hospital, and as we said, this matter is being investigated both by the gardaí and by the Data Protection Commissioner. And Diarmaid Hallinan, Assistant Commissioner, joins us from Portarlington. Diarmaid, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
When did this come to your attention first?
It came, we got the first report from Tallaght Hospital, I think it was the 25th of July.
And on foot of that, what steps were put in train?
Well, once we get a breach notification on this scale, the first step that we focus in on is securing the data before we do anything else. And in this case, in some cases that's more complex than in others. Thereafter, we look at informing the people affected by the incident, or more to the point, we make the data controller involved inform the people affected by the incident. Their next step is to steps taken to prevent a repeat incident, and in a case in a difficult case, it might involve a report from this office to the organisation concerned that would have a list of findings and recommendations for the organisation to put in place. Okay,
and if we examine some of those steps in a little more detail, when information might be held by an entity overseas, and that seems to be the case here, in general terms, how do you contain the data if it's not within the jurisdiction?
It would depend on the particular case. If it's in a jurisdiction within the European Union, that's relatively straightforward because there are data protection authorities in every EU member state, or in fact in every EEA member state. So we would simply contact our opposite numbers in the relevant country, and they would act in our stead in the jurisdiction concerned. When it goes outside of the European Economic Area, it becomes a little bit more difficult. It depends on the country. Some have equivalents of data protection authorities, others don't. But the law around international transfers of personal data is really complex, and that's one of the aspects we will be investigating in a case involving international transfers of data. So you'd be looking at the legal basis for the transfer to take place in the first place.
Okay, and another step you mentioned was informing those who might be affected. Mm-hmm. In this situation, Cora just told us that they weren't able to say on that free phone number whether she had been affected. How long does it usually take to establish the scope of the leak?
It's very hard when you're talking about security breaches to talk about how long things usually take because the cases differ so much from each other. So, for example, if somebody breaches a website or hacks a website, you can find out in sometimes a matter of hours how many people are affected because you can check the logs. In this case, it's much more complex. It's not a simple website breach. It's a situation in which Tallaght Hospital, along with other clients of this company, have been putting in information into that company's systems. The kind of information they put in differs. So some information going into the system may not include personal data at all. Some may contain information that doesn't include the patient's name but might include some other information. So creating an assessment of the overall number of people affected is actually quite complicated and could take a considerable period of time.
Okay. And as far as preventing a repeat occurrence, I'm not sure whether the breach took place here or in the Philippines, overseas. I'm not sure whether you're prepared to say that at this stage. But if the breach was to be in another jurisdiction, how do you prevent it happening when you're based here in Ireland and the entity given the information in the first instance is also based in Ireland?
You go to the medical transcription service and look at their systems, and then you approach similar companies in the same sector, and you go through their systems and make sure that they comply with the data protection laws in future. That's all you can do. In most cases, you can't absolutely rule out security breaches in the future. There's always potential for human error, no matter what kind of system you have in place. So you might have the best encryption on the face of the planet, but if somebody tapes the password to the machine, then you're finished. So all you can do is reduce the probability of a further breach.
Is it unusual for personal information of this nature to be transferred overseas? Whatever about outside the European Economic Area, but overseas in full stop?
I'll be honest. I'm not particularly familiar with the medical sector. I can tell you that the international flows of personal data are quite extensive. It is very common for information of various types of company to be sent abroad, either because the parent company is elsewhere or because they're subcontracting to companies in other jurisdictions. But as I say, there is a complex body of law that governs how that can happen, and it's basically designed to ensure that the personal data, when it's sent outside the jurisdiction, enjoys the same level of protection that it would, or as close as possible, if it was to stay within the jurisdiction. But one of the questions that arises in a case like this is whether those rules are followed.
Okay, and without getting bogged down in the complexities of those laws, is the onus to follow the rules on the subcontractor or on the person or the entity receiving the information in the first instance?
Ultimate responsibility always lies with the body or the organisation that the customer gave their information to. Okay, so if I give my information, or you give your information to the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, I might have a contract in place with a sub-processor to store that information for me, but it remains my responsibility, and then I have to make sure that I have the right contracts in place with that subcontracted company to make sure that your information is as safe as it would have been if it had stayed with me.
Just on a final point, I'm conscious that many people from this part of the country may attend Tallaght Hospital, so they're wondering what potential consequences could arise from this. Cora indicated she felt violated, she felt exposed and so on. But could this information be used for any sinister purpose?
We've no indications so far in the investigation that anybody is attempting to use this information to target individual patients. It's possible. There are various ways that information like this could be misused. So you could use it to attack the hospital. You could use it to attack the medical transcription company. You could deliberately set out to damage their reputations or to threaten them, or you could use it. Potentially, you could use it to blackmail an individual patient, but we've absolutely no indication of anything like that happening. So far, this looks like a failure to control personal data, and that's the perspective we're looking at it from. It's not. There's no evidence so far of a criminal involvement.
Diarmaid Hallinan, Assistant Commissioner with the Data Protection Commissioner's Office in Port Arlington, thank you very much for taking our call.